Welcome to Magic in the Moment, Mindfulness in Real Time. My name is Clayton Platt, and I'll be your host for this podcast journey. And for many people, practicing mindfulness has very little to do with sitting on a cushion, lighting incense, or even focusing on their breath. Just paying attention to what they're doing at any moment, and doing this intentionally, can create that same magic. Our time together is intended to share how mindfulness plays out in everyday life for our guests. And before we begin, here's a word from our sponsor, Meditation for Leadership. We all feel it, the pressure to keep up, to perform, to push through. But lasting success doesn't come from speeding up. It comes from slowing down, leaning in, and creating the space to lead from within. That space is where we shift from autopilot to intention, building mindful habits that strengthen focus and calm. It's where we stay connected to our values and purpose, choosing to respond instead of react. It's where we unlock our potential to positively shape our own lives and empower others to grow and thrive. That's the work of Meditation for Leadership. If you're ready to create the space for sustainable success, visit meditationforleadership.org. Now, a few episodes back, I talked about the ego's whisper, that soft, persuasive voice that shows up in our quietest moments and makes a very reasonable case for going backward, for reopening decisions we've already made, for choosing safety over growth. And today I want to talk about a different expression of that same impulse, not the whisper, the shout. That voice that arrives not in the quiet, but in the loudest moments, when the stakes are highest, when the doors are about to open, when everything you've worked for is suddenly right in front of you, and something inside you asks, what if I blow this? Every high performer knows this voice. Every leader who's walked into a room that mattered knows this voice. Every one of us who has cared deeply about something knows this voice. Today, I want to revisit 3 conversations. One with a professional squash champion, another an entrepreneur who went from breaking rackets to sitting 3-month meditation retreats, and a sports psychologist who spent his career decoding exactly what that voice is, where it comes from, and what to do when it inevitably shows up. Because here's what all 3 of them taught me. The voice isn't the enemy, and fighting it may be the very thing that makes it louder. Let's begin. Nick Hamburger was a competitive tennis player in high school. Good enough to be serious about it. Good enough to play in college. Serious enough to break 7 rackets. If you've ever played a competitive sport, or frankly been in any high-stakes situation, you know the anger that Nick is describing. The frustration when your body won't do what your mind demands. When the gap between who you want to be and who you are in this moment feels unbearable. Nick's mother saw something in that anger, and during his senior year in high school, when a knee injury put him on the couch for weeks, she handed him a meditation tape. Joseph Goldstein, Mindfulness of Thinking. And here's what happened.
So this was my introduction to meditation, came through being a competitive tennis player growing up and having a lot of anger that showed up on the court. And all throughout my childhood, kind of from age maybe 8 or so up until into high school. And I broke 7 rackets in like middle school and high school. And yeah, I think it was something my mom and I discussed a lot, and we tried to work on my mental game. And in my senior year of high school, I had a knee injury and got surgery. And so then I had a number of weeks like just on the couch, even before I could walk really. And she was like, this is the perfect time to work on your mental game because you really can't move and can't do anything. And so she gave me a Joseph Goldstein meditation tape, Mindfulness of Thinking. And right there in that first meditation, like there was this exploration of what are thoughts. And I had the experience of being able to observe my internal voice, which up to that point I just thought was like, or it was like the authority on life. And I didn't know that you could just listen to it like music or like someone else talking. And so right away I got very into it. And I think it did help with my temperament on the court, although I never got back to competing quite in the same way because that was end of high school, beginning of college, but definitely catapulted my interest in meditation, which became and still is my biggest passion, I would say.
I didn't know that you could just listen to it like music or like someone else talking. That sentence has stayed with me since I first heard it, because that's the whole game, isn't it? Not silencing the voice, not wrestling it to the ground, just learning to listen differently. Dr. Mitchell Green has a name for that voice. He calls it mind chatter, and he traces his obsession with it back to one of baseball's most haunting mysteries.
Like a lot of people, I grew up as an athlete and as a competitive athlete. And when I was in graduate school, I couldn't help but notice, and other people pointed it out to me, that I was sort of obsessed with the professional athletes who would mess up and have some sort of mental block on a grand stage, whether it was a golfer with the yips or a catcher with the yips. And then I tell the story in my book about a second baseman for the New York Yankees named Chuck Knobloch, who also had this massive mental block in front of the world. He went from being an MVP in the league to being out of the league years later because he couldn't accurately throw the ball from second base to first base, something he had done thousands and thousands of times. And he was throwing the ball over the first baseman's head in the dirt. By the end of his career, he was underhanding the ball or walking it over to the first baseman. And I was in grad school at the time, and I guess that never left me.
Chuck Knobloch. I remember him, an all-star, an MVP, suddenly unable to make the shortest throw in baseball. Mitch's question: how is it that somebody so good could stink so bad? That's the right question for all of us, because it isn't about baseball. It's about every moment any of us has performed below our potential because something internal got in the way. So, what exactly is mind chatter? Here's Mitch.
Back in those graduate school days was when I learned from a professor named Dr. Jay Efron in a seminar, when he gave us an exercise where he didn't give us any instruction except to close our eyes and put our heads down and listen to the conversation we're having with ourselves. And I could remember like it was yesterday thinking, like most of us were in the class, when we revealed afterwards what we were thinking, what the hell is he talking about? This is the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Like, what conversation? And what's he doing while we have our heads down? Like, is he analyzing us? Is he, as a young graduate student, is he drinking his coffee? Is he, what, like, this is really weird. And afterwards, we heard from other people in our seminar. There's only 8 of us in my graduate, and my class. Other people were offended that he was asking us to do that. I mean, we were all like, what's this all about? And the big meta point of this all was, that's the conversation. The conversation that said, what is this? I don't think this is real. I'm not even having a conversation, is in fact the conversation you were having with yourself. And that was such a light bulb moment for me that I think has everything to do with the work I'm doing today, which is I'm trying to get people to be aware that there's sort of a dialogue going on in their head, and that there's, the way I refer to it, the way I talk about it, that there's a sort of a them, and then there's this something called mind chatter. They're the ones who wants to go to the tournament and score 10 points and help their team get to the playoffs. Their chatter has a totally different agenda. That voice is very primal and extremely protective, wants to see them survive, both physically and psychologically.
There's a them, and there's also another voice. That distinction between you and your chatter is one of the most liberating ideas I've encountered in this work, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The voice that says you're going to blow it isn't you. It's a protection mechanism, an ancient alarm system doing exactly what it was built to do. The problem, Mitch says, is that it fires at the worst possible times. And when it does, athletes, frankly, all of us, think something is wrong with us. Mitch has a memorable way of reframing what to do when it shows up uninvited.
The work that I do is getting them to be more aware of it. And instead of trying to shut out that one voice that makes them uncomfortable, as you say, and as you help people with through meditation and mindfulness practices, I am also trying to get them in my own way to make room for that voice, to see that it has a role in their lives. It's not just going to go away, and that even the most top performers in the world have that voice as well, and they as well need to learn how to manage it and make room for it.
Tea's over here. Make yourself at home. You didn't invite it, but it's here. And the goal isn't to throw it out. It's to stop letting it run the party. Todd Harrity knows something about this. 3-time U.S. national squash champion, Pan Am Games gold medalist, former world number 32. And by his own account, someone who struggled deeply with performance anxiety at the highest level of his sport. A single moment in the back of a taxi says it all.
I was in a tournament in India, and the tournament was a circus. There were some complications in the beginning with a few players testing positive for COVID, and so the tournament got delayed. Anyway, I was doing a lot of meditating to center myself and deal with all the distractions. I remember I was in the back of a taxi, actually, and going to the final. I made the final of the tournament. It was my best tournament yet in my entire career, actually. And normally I would be very nervous, very distracted, thinking about the match. Am I going to win? Am I going to lose? Well, this is such a big opportunity and I don't want to squander it and everything. But I just remember just being very calm and just being able to really take a deep breath and think, I'm not playing this match right now. I'm in the back of a taxi right now. And I'm in India, in Chennai, a new city that's very different from where I'm from. And this is where I am right now. So I remember just looking out the window and watching the people go about their lives, and no one is thinking or caring about my match. And I just remember being very calm. And really that whole day from then on, I did a great job of staying in the present. And whenever my mind got distracted and started thinking about the outcome of this match, I was able to just come back into my body and the moment, really. And it was just amazing. There were a few times when I really felt it as powerfully as in that moment.
I'm not playing this match right now. I'm in the back of a taxi right now. That reminds me of something that Greg Morley said in our podcast a couple of weeks ago, but I digress. That's the whole practice, right here in a single sentence. Not a visualization, not a mantra, not a breathing technique, though I'm going to tell you those matter too. This is just a clear-eyed recognition of where he actually was and a choice to be there fully. Where am I? Chennai, in a taxi. What do I see? People going about their lives. None of them are thinking about my match. And from that ordinary moment of presence, Todd played the best tournament of his career. But I want to be honest with you. It doesn't always arrive that cleanly. Nick Hamburger would tell you that himself. When Nick and his business partner went on Shark Tank, their egg white chip company, 3 years in, the adrenaline built past what he knew how to hold. And here's what actually happened when those doors opened.
The morning before going on the show, a lot of nerves, a lot of energy in the body. And then as we're basically at a certain point, they told us, okay, we're pretty much ready for you. So we waited outside these doors that open up to the hallway where you walk down. And when we were waiting for those doors to open, it felt like a race. Like I ran cross country in middle school. And so it felt like that feeling of like the gun's about to go off to start. And you're just like, you got so much adrenaline. I've had other experiences like this since where when there's so much energy in the body, it can get to a point where I think I just haven't necessarily trained enough to handle it. So what my response is to dissociate, not on purpose, but it just happens. And so by the time we were actually up there in front of them and starting to talk, I felt that feeling of just being a little bit distant from the whole experience.
My response is to disassociate, not on purpose. It just happens. That's the real experience for most of us. We're not always Todd in the Chennai taxi. Sometimes we're Nick, waiting for the doors to open, and the best we can do is survive the moment and learn from it afterward. And that's exactly what Mitch is teaching. Not a formula for perfect performance, something more honest and more durable than that. Todd discovered his own version of his truth through a conversation with his coach in England, a moment when he was ready to walk away from the pro tour entirely.
I remember there was one time when I had moved to England to train, and I was training under this coach, Hadrian Stiff, another big proponent and believer in mindfulness. And I'd come off of some difficult results and bad results. There were many. And I remember saying to him that I just wanted to stop this and quit this and just, maybe find a different job. I loved being in England and I could play squash, but really just play in the leagues there, which would still be fun, still a little bit of competition, but it would be much less pressure and squash would still be in my life and I could enjoy it, but I would be doing something else. And I thought that I would be much happier. But I remember him saying to me, he said, well, listen, Todd, you could do that, and that's fine. You could retire from the pro tour and just play in leagues, and it would be less pressure, and squash would still be in your life. But if you do that, just know that's not the real deal.
Just know that that's not the real deal. That's the reframe. Not running from pressure, understanding that pressure is the point. That the difficulty you signed up for and the difficulty you're experiencing are the same difficulty. I think about that every time I walk into a room to lead a session. Every time something matters enough that a voice shows up to question whether I'm ready. And I think about that the years that I was doing theater. That little bit of stage fright. And all it meant was I cared. I signed up for something hard. The chatter is confirmation that it matters. For Todd, learning to work with that voice rather than against it opened up something deeper than better performance. It actually changed how he understood who he was. Separate from squash, separate from rankings, separate from results.
Stepping away from squash was very difficult because it's been my life for so long and a big part of my identity, and still is to a certain extent. I get introduced as Todd Harity. He was a big squash star, one of the best American players, one of the best on the men's side, and this and that. And you kind of internalize that. I did all sorts of things to help me help me deal with that. One is I remember just kind of practicing introducing myself and talking to someone and explaining who I am and my interests, but not mentioning squash at all. And realizing that in some ways that was kind of challenging, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think definitely mindfulness is how I used it, was just connecting more with who I am is not what I do.
Who I am is not what I do. That sentence is harder than it sounds for anyone who's built an identity around achievement. And it points towards something Nick landed on after 5 years of building a business, after a 3-month retreat at Insight Meditation Society, and a lot of time sitting with the question of what actually matters. His teacher, Gil Fronsdale, gave him a line that I've carried with me ever since.
I had a teacher that told me it's not even that means don't justify the ends. It's that the means are the ends. And that's the present moment, right? It's like the present moment is actually all you have.
It's not that the means don't justify the ends. It's that the means are the end. The present moment's all you have. The taxi in Chennai, the door's about to open, the breath before the serve. That isn't a consolation prize for people who don't win. That's the whole thing. Nick put it another way, through a reframe that I think speaks to anyone building something, competing at anything, or trying just to show up fully in their life.
I think something that was helpful for me, although I think it took me a really long time to accept, and probably would for many entrepreneurs, is kind of the Buddha's framework around greed and aversion, right? It's like greed and aversion and ignorance are the causes of suffering. And I think for many entrepreneurs like me can be biased towards being a greed type, where like a lot of your pattern in life is to be convinced that the next shiny thing, achievement, romantic partner, experience is going to be like it. And just it's hard to fully embrace this truth, and we often forget it, but it's like the Buddha's saying, he's like, this is a myth, basically, that you're going to get something and it's going to last as a source of happiness. And so I think that's one thing of like, even if you sell your business for however much you want to sell it for, or way more in 5 years or whatever, it's not going to fundamentally solve your human equation. And so I think that's one thing. There's an entrepreneur that wrote a book called Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, just as an encouragement for people to like love the process of the problem and working on it, but not necessarily be obsessed with solving it entirely, just so you can stay invested in the process. I think that's probably one piece of advice. And so then, yeah, that means, oh, this is my life. This isn't just a 5-year sprint that's kind of separate from my life. This isn't the Manhattan Project where I'm going to go move to New Mexico for a few years and then I'll go back to living normally. Like, I think much better if you can to be like, treat it like you're a school teacher or something. This is my job. This is my vocation. So I can also do all the other things I love at the same time. But it's hard.
That being focused on the process rather than the results is kind of a huge aspect of being in the moment, isn't it? Right? If you're content to be on that path and not obsessed with where the path is eventually taking you, right? And getting to that end point, there's typically a greater sense of contentment and willingness to let things be that need to be, and to be able to see, I think, with some more clarity, right? Because you're not missing the inputs that the process is telling you. I think that's a fair assessment of what you're saying. Is if you're in love with the problem, you're going to spend more and more time trying to uncover aspects of the problem versus, I need to get here. I need to solve this and move on to accomplish that. Accomplishment is not a bad thing at all, but being obsessed with the accomplishment may be, right? This is my life. This isn't just a 5-year sprint. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution, not the validation at the finish line, the process, the practice, the moment you're actually in. And perhaps the deepest thing Todd said in our conversation, the note he chose to end on, is that the real motivator for all of this work isn't even personal. It's relational.
We go to the gym and lift weights to get stronger or to get a stronger bicep or whatever it is. But in meditating or mindfulness or this gratefulness, strengthening that bit of your brain that's grateful, that's at ease, that's happy. Every time I do that, I think, okay, that part of my brain is getting stronger. That's getting more blood flow. That's getting stronger and really improving my outlook and my positivity. And also the big motivator I've realized for me in mindfulness is when I'm constantly reminding myself that I'm not just doing it for me. I want to be a better son. I want to be a better friend. I want to, be a better brother, and I want to be able to support the people that I care about and be a force of positivity for those around me. And for me, that's a bigger motivator. I'm the most unhappy when I'm just consumed with myself, and I'm happiest when I'm thinking about others. So that's one thing one of the things I've learned for sure from all this.
I'm most unhappy when I'm consumed with myself. I'm happiest when I'm thinking about others. There it is. The whole arc in one sentence. We work on the voice. We learn to hear it without being ruled by it. Not just to perform better or suffer less. We do it so that we can be fully present for the people we love. More available, more kind, more alive to the moments that actually matter. That's what Todd found in the back of that taxi in Chennai, what Nick found on a meditation cushion after 7 broken rackets, what Mitch has spent his career trying to give every athlete who walks through his door convinced that the voice in their head means something's gone wrong. Nothing's gone wrong. You're here. You care. You showed up. Now, where are you? And what are you doing? That's the only question that matters. Thank you for being with me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, I'd love to hear about it. Find me at mindfulnessrealtime.com or leave a review wherever you listen. It generally means a lot more than you know. My deep gratitude to Todd Harity, Nick Hamburger, and Dr. Mitchell Green for the conversations that made this episode possible. And until next time, this is Clayton Platt, reminding you to look for those moments of magic in your life where mindfulness plays out in real time.